Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Right after returning to Crossroad, they scared the escort forces, and kicked them out of the city. The captain wanted to confirm the execution, but he didn't want a liar here, so he kicked him out too. Taku is allowing the Agis team to use the free rooms in the manor, and for the official excuse he said he's keeping them in prison. With his authority he could just turn a blind eye and keep them forever. But there are human eyes here, so it might cause a problem since the humans fought the other species for generations. There's a lot of high-key racist here. Taku wonders where he should keep them in the future, and while he was deep in thought he arrived in front of the door with the sub-party in it. He knocks on the door, then tells them he's coming in. We hear one of the members saying how happy they are about having a bed, and that it's been a while since they've had a proper room like this. The other kids are happy too, saying that the food is great. They start playing around and talking about snacks. Then they notice that Taku opened their door. They immediately greet him. He says there's no point in them trying to act seriously now. Godan says he has no idea what he's talking about, and they are cold, emotionless murdering machines. Taku says stop the cap and asks if they want a late night snack or not. They start eyeballing the basket. It jumps to a bit later. They are all digging into the food, but keep trying to be serious. Taku tells them they should just eat comfortably. Godan says they are comfortable. Taku says he can't take him seriously with pillow fluff on his head. And tells us how Godan briefed him on all of their abilities. First, Godan is an SR who is a metal sorcerer. As long as the metal is iron he can change the shape into anything. The young elf Bodybag is an R, her ability is telekinesis and she can easily lift heavy things. The other three are all archers, but with different roles. Old Girl is an R that does close range shooting. She's specialized in group fights and uses double crossbows, and is experienced in monster hunting. Skull is N-ranked. Taku says he's not sure what he's been through, but based on his face he's maybe been tortured. He's a long-distance fighter, and is usually silent, so he does well in stealth. Finally, the main firepower in the team, Burnout. She is an SR character who uses a mouth gag. Her weapon is a personally engineered stationary ballista. They say she cannot control her powers yet, so if he can help her grow properly there's a lot of potential. But how they are sitting now they just seem like normal children, so for them to be sacrificing themselves so their species can live longer shows how dear their situation is. Godan says that they'll never forget the great mercy he's shown them. Taku says it's just a late night snack. Originally he was going to just give them some snacks to loosen them up then question them, but seeing how defensive they are acting it'll be hard to get answers. He asks anyway, how long the five of them have been a team. Godan says it's been a year and a half, but since they were special forces candidates they were managed together. So they've known each other since they were young. Taku asks for him to explain. We learn that after they lost their country and land the only thing left were elves themselves. For the children who can fight, they receive training at an early age as part of the special forces. And the higher-ups then put those with appropriate skills into a team together. Then are assigned a single mission, and after they finish they are disposed of. From the human empire's standpoint it's an effective strategy. Since it isn't human lives being sacrificed there is no risk. If they succeed then good and they can play innocent, and act like it was all the elves' plan from the very start. While it's so effective, it's also very brutal. He wonders what kind of person would abuse such emotionless tactics. He asks who the supreme commander of the Agis Corps is. Godan says he won't hesitate to tell him, and that he probably already knows it. Taku thinks how he couldn't be further from the truth. Godan tells him that the commander of the Agis Corps is the second Prince Fernandez. We all know him as the man who sent the prisoners to Taku in the first place. He's also the same man who shackled the sub-party in the first place. We learn that Godan gave Taku a switch that will explode the shackles on their necks. As soon as Fernandez was mentioned, all of the party looked uneasy. They don't care about sacrificing themselves, but his name makes them feel fear. Taku wonders what kind of man he is, since he never appeared in the game. He wants to keep an eye on him. Now he regrets asking the question since the atmosphere is gloomy. He changes the topic, asking how they like their room. They say they've been kept in a jail for death row prisoners, and trapped inside of an escort carriage. So this room is nothing but paradise to them, and they don't ever want to leave the room. He then asks them how the food was since he put some thought into it. He says that elves are mostly vegetarian, so he had the chef cook them something they'd enjoy. Godan says after eating prison food it was a grand meal. Godan also says some of their members are at an age where they have a strong appetite, so they appreciate Taku's courtesy. But he'd prefer if Taku was more comfortable and treated them like objects. Taku thinks about how that's uncomfortable for him, since there's no way he'd be able to do that. After that they discuss their lives, such as clothing etc. He tells them they'll keep adjusting as they move forward. They tell him good night, he says it back to them, and notices old girl waving at him. So he waves back at her. He's surprised he waved back, and once he leaves he can overhear the Agis group saying he's such a good guy. And Taku thinks about how he should get them a better room with soundproofing. He talks about how he wasn't able to ask them what he was curious about, which was the war. The war was a big event in the game, and from the moment the duchy collapses multiple large events happen. War refugees flood to Crossroad, and good quality mercenaries too. Some of them form a large hostile group. If Taku can absorb them all it can be a strong support for the battlefront. But if it goes bad then they'll have to fight both humans and monsters. In the game it went smoothly. But now he has accepted the people responsible for the war into his party. He's unsure on how this will go. He then sees Lucas hiding behind a corner, and asks him what he's doing. Lucas says that since Taku went in there alone he was prepared, they are still death row prisoners. Taku shows the neck explodey device 3000, saying it's no problem. And he decides to keep surveillance on them. The next day, Taku thinks about how the next stage is right around the corner. They need to start ramping up the defenses slowly, so he stopped by the blacksmith's in the morning. The blacksmith was ready for him, saying that he has the item he commissioned last time. He opens the box to reveal its special Mana Core SSR rank. Taku is pogging out. It's from Evangeline's equipment that he had disassembled. While it may seem like a waste to use 4 items to get only 1. Depending on how damaged the gear is, it hella reduces the chance to get a Mana Core. It was an 8% but he got it. The smith also made 3 guns, which were made using the Ratman Champion's Mana Core, are ranked. The last shot of each magazine will always critically hit, it's Jin. Since there are 3 guns they are named Cerberus. Taku likes the names, there have been 6 guns made so far. Once the smith heard that a single person is using the guns, he decides to lessen the burden it would put on the user, so he made them small. Taku praises him, then tells him that he needs to make the next equipment quickly too. And he pulls out the golden Gargoyle's core, and some of his gold armor. And tells him it's boss equipment. This surprises the smithy. And then Taku recaps again how boss cores are dropped by bosses, shocker. And the cores can be used to make equipment or artifacts. But for the equipment to be made, you need both the boss's core and material. Due to it having strong abilities, it's always good to make them when given the time and chance. Until now it never lined up so he didn't make them. For example, the stage 1 boss the Spectre Knight's weapon is a greatsword, which nobody in the party uses. After that, the elite monsters replaced the bosses but none of them dropped any mana cores. But they finally ended up getting a mana core and armor pieces. Which is why they could make the boss's armor. Taku says he needs it as light and thin as possible so it's easy to move around it. The smithy says it'll decrease the durability, and Taku says it doesn't matter if it's comfortable to move in. While it was commissioned in the shape like armor, it's closer to a sorcerer's full dress. He tells the smithy to keep it up, then heads out to the alchemist's workshop. The artifact repairs are going smoothly, but this isn't why he's here. He quickly greets Lily, saying her favorite prince is here. She happily asks if he needs her for this wave, and he says yeah. She starts to shiver with joy saying she's happy to be a sorcerer. And starts to even cry tears of pure joy. She says that she has a request. She asks that when more junior sorcerers join to make sure they all visit her. She says that she acts like a know-it-all, but she isn't actually talented. In the Ivory Tower she wasn't able to train under a good teacher, or even get educated. And after other talented sorcerers come here she'd like to be an office lady. She doesn't want to be looked down on by her juniors either. She asks to be treated like a senior sorcerer. He says he understands, and that nobody will look down on them, and if they do he'll beat them up. He'll always help, as long as it isn't her retirement. Lily says she won't run away, and if he calls she'll join right away. He thanks her, and he says he needs to get the Agis sorceress to greet her. Later that night on his way back to his manor, he's looking over the status window. And says how since Jupiter is out of the stage, he wonders how to defend the stage the most effectively. He wonders what combination and strat to use, then his necklace begins to release an energy. That floods out of the carriage. Taku says it's the dark event tracker. He says it's the misfortune that someone gave him to ruin the game, he's just glad to know it's coming. The event is that there will be 1 additional boss monster. Taku looks and sees that there are actually 2. He starts to look stressed out, saying that the Gargoyle army is already difficult, but now there are two. He decides to think about it positively, since now he'll get twice the amount of items dropped by the boss, along with the experience. We learn that in regards to fighting two bosses, it's a common thing in the late game. So he knows how to fight them, and he quotes Nietzsche's "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." He says they should make the dark event crueler, and send more enemies. He starts to go too positive into it, saying it's just free experience and items. He'll make them regret getting him stronger. He kept hyping himself up, and carried on his way home. After all of that, the preparations for the defense battle went smoothly. Well, that's what he wished, but they've run into an issue. And Taku sees that Lily has been drifting in her wheelchair. Taku wonders why she's spazzing out, then she grabs him and wheels to the other side of the room. Lily asks him if Godhand is an elf. Taku says yes. She looks afraid and he asks her what's wrong. She asks if he knows how she got the characteristic of fire skin. He says it was due to goblins invading her village, and so she wouldn't get hurt by their blades it awakened. She shakes, saying that's right. Then asks why he thinks the goblins were there. She says it was due to her family's servant elf. Her family took pity on an elf family, and even gave them a house, and anything else they needed. But 1 year later, they said they couldn't forgive humans and opened the village gates to a goblin horde. The village burned, and her parents were murdered. She was left all alone, so no matter how well they treat elves, they will hate humans. She says they will betray Taku, and she's saying it for his sake. He must not trust them ever. Taku looks at her, then asks if she hates elves. She shakes, saying she hates them as much as she's scared of blades. Taku asks even though they aren't the ones that wronged her, and she says that she can't help but hate different species, and it's probably the same for them. Taku says this is the reality. There's a long deep chain of hate that was born from the long history of this country. Godhand says excuse me, and startles them both since they didn't notice him move. He apologizes, saying that it's just from working as an agent. Taku asks if he heard the entire conversation, to which he says yes. Lily's face got paler after Godhand got closer. He then says he wants to say something. He doesn't intend to ask for her forgiveness. Since even if he apologizes, the wounds will remain there, so she'll never heal from her emotion towards elves. But they are currently facing a war. Even before his country fell, humans and elves worked together to defeat monster invasions. They have a common enemy. So they should set aside personal feelings, and fight together under Taku. His words were the epitome of logic and reason, but Lily is a racist. She says she hates elves, and says Godhand is the same. They hate humans for enslaving their kind and destroying their country. They have no choice but to be suspicious of one another after their history, and it'll remain like that until one species is left. She turns her head, saying the other soldiers will be anxious at the presence of an elf, and that hiring them is narrow-minded, and she hopes Taku reconsiders. He tells her that means she'll have to continue fighting on the front line. She says she'd rather do that than fight with an elf. Taku says he can't believe she is saying all of this, and he remembers Lucas' behavior earlier, and says most of the soldiers will probably think like Lily. He wonders what to do, but Godhand says he'll give Lily his honest thoughts. She's right and they dislike humans, but why does that matter? His country has already fallen, and their lives are just tools for humans. Without the mercy of the Empire, they are just creatures who could die at any moment. Even if they have treacherous feelings, their lives are controlled by Taku. He reveals the collar, then looks sombersome. He says he wishes for his people to continue living, and for his teammates to be happy. That is all he wants, and he's sure it's the same for Lily. And says she's working here despite her physical condition to protect those precious to her. She goes to say something, but he continues by saying that elves and humans cannot have a good relationship. But they have a common enemy, and are both fighting for those dear to them. So is there any more reason they should fight together? Lily says they can fight against the monsters only once, but she can never forgive his people. Godhand says he's used to it. She tells Taku it will just be this one defense battle, but if the elves stay here afterwards, then she will leave the battlefront. Then she wheels herself away. Taku thinks about how she's a good person, she's thoughtful and cares for others, and willing to make personal sacrifices for the greater good. He didn't know she could act so differently, and how her hatred runs deep. He tells Godhand he only brought him here to say hi, and he didn't expect this. Godhand says he experiences it often, and that Lily was actually tame compared to what he's dealt with in the past. Taku says he guesses everyone is more sensitive to this than he thought. Godhand says he finds Taku interesting, since even from the humans that treat them well he can still generally feel prejudice. But that he doesn't have any of that, and he's thankful for it. Taku nervously sweats since it's just because he's from a different world. God Hand tells him not to worry about how the others treat them, as they'll prove themselves by doing their best during the defense battle. Taku smiles, saying it'd be nice if his parties were on good terms. But with the animosity he cannot help feeling worried. It's his job as the commander to carry their personal conflicts as well. It is confirmed that the Agis group will be participating in the defense battle. Later in the afternoon he gets Lucas to help him carry something, and we see God Hand is surprised, as Taku has prepared clothes for them all. They are all really happy about it, and immediately try them on. Taku says it's a prototype for the military uniform he'll give to the soldiers. He thought about how to make the members all have a sense of belonging, and the easiest thing he thought of was making them all wear the same clothes. While it's costly, it is worth it. This is why he made a separate uniform for those fighting on the monster front, and he believes they have to look cool too. It has to be a fashion item, something you can wear proudly anytime. Ada approved the uniforms, and even Evangeline, who is a city girl, said they looked good. Taku explains to them that their uniforms have hoods so they can hide their identities, and then says it suits them. He says from now on, they are no longer the Agis Corps and have all died at this moment. They are now the 3rd Prince's Special Forces Unit, the Shadow Unit. They all salute him in uniform. He says they'll all get new identities as it'd be troublesome to treat them like the Agis group still. He tells them to get ready in a few days to go hunting, and just like that, the day of the defense battle arrives. The sky was covered in the darkness of the enemy army. We get a short flashback of Taku explaining to both parties what the plan is, and the main strategy for this wave. But of course we don't hear what it is, and the flashback ends with Taku and Lucas staring at the enemy army. We can see that there aren't a ton of mobs this time, they are just high quality. Taku says he's been waiting for this. Lucas informs him that it may rain, which will affect the battle. Taku says it doesn't matter since regardless they'll just follow the plan. Simply just killing the monsters and protecting the people. Taku gets everyone's attention and tells them he'll keep it short. They'll just kill them all, feast then sleep peacefully. He gets everyone to ready their weapons, and once all of the artillery was ready, he orders them to fire. They start blasting. Multiple cannon shots all being fired simultaneously. Head straight towards the Gargoyle army, creating a display of gargoyle fireworks. The explosions create a smokescreen in the sky, and the soldiers say that their attacks aren't working, as the gargoyles begin to fly out. Taku tells them to stop yapping and listen to orders, to focus on firing. They continue their onslaught onto the gargoyles, as the explosions echo throughout the battlefield. We go back to the strategy flashback, of Taku explaining the kill zone. Lucas says, won't the enemies just come flying from the sky? Taku says yes, so the ground cannot be their kill zone. So they'll make it in the sky. They'll keep shooting their artillery to make a fire net, to create a wall in the sky. While it won't hurt the gargoyles at all due to their physical resistances, so it'll be purely to alter their course. The center of the defense line will be purposefully weaker, and this will be their kill zone. Flashback ends, and Taku tells them to maintain the firewall. The soldiers were initially flustered, but they ended up calming down. He says if he gives them a goal to focus on they will do so. The storm of cannon fire continued and eventually began to make the enemies stop. This is all part of the plan, and we see one of the magic turret's attacks fly into the kill zone, cracking one of the gargoyle skins, allowing a cannonball to shatter it. Taku says that's it, and just like that the kill count began to pile up. Taku tells everyone to keep the pressure up. The gargoyle army that was approaching from the left and right began to move in a single file line, and headed straight into the kill zone that they purposefully opened up. Taku compliments the gargoyles for falling for his trap. And boom, flashback again. Lucas is asking Taku what the plan is after they enter the kill zone. Since Jupiter cannot join, how will they defeat them? Taku says it's not guaranteed, but there might be a way. He asks if they know how gargoyles fly. Damien asks if it's with their wings. Taku says just the wings won't lift their bodies. He asks if it's magic then. Taku says yes, they use magic on their wings. Then he says next question, what happens if two magic forces of the same elements collide? Lily raises her hand and grumpily stares at God Hand. He picks Lily, and she says the higher magic will swallow up the lower level one. He says yes, then says if they shoot the gargoyles with a higher level of wind magic, what would happen? Flashback ends again, and he's telling Lily it's time. She says yes, and begins to activate the wind artifact. It activates, and begins to fire at the gargoyles while it isn't anything special. This is all they need for this. Since if they shoot them with a higher level magic, the magic on their wings will be absorbed and lose their ability to fly. And due to the gargoyles all being made of stone and steel, them falling from this high up will make them unable to survive on impact. They begin to shatter on the floor, as they cannot go around the kill zone. They just slowly go to the center and fall down. He says there's a definite pattern monsters follow. They use the shortest route to kill the nearest humans, so before they lose their magic on their wings they will dive bomb into the defensive line. Taku says they cannot allow themselves to be pushed back, then asks Lily how long the artifacts have. She informs him it's around 20 seconds, and he tells her to prepare the next artifact immediately. She activates the second one, and with the power of the second one combined with the first, it was a hella strong gust of wind. Most of the gargoyle were hit by the wall of wind, and fell. But there's a few of them that began to reach the walls. We see one landing atop the wall, and then another one climbing up from the side. And as one goes to eat a soldier, Evangeline and Lucas swiftly rush into action. And hit it in the noggin, causing it to fall back down the wall. Lucas tells her he'll leave the right side to her. She says she could handle his side too. Taku explains how all of the soldiers are involved in keeping the kill zone active, then he asks Damien if he's ready. Damien says he is, and he'll do everything he can. It's his and Taku's job to push back the remaining enemies through combat. It's time for the first party's battle to begin, and we see them already. We see Evangeline holding off 2 gargoyles, but Damien assists her with his cheat skill. Taku and Lucas are killing their side as well, as the last monster drops at Lucas's feet. He informs Taku that the first round is over. Taku tells him to keep it up as it's just the start. The gargoyles were split into 6 large groups. The ones they defeated were the first 100 leading the pack. The second wave starts, and the gargoyles begin to dive bomb in, and even crawl up the wall. As one of them reaches the top, Taku cuts his fingers off, causing it to fall down the wall, smashing into pieces. Taku is proud, and says he's been practicing for the last few days. Because of the class debuff, he struggled with the mastery rate, but because he trained vigorously he was able to use them well. He says if it continued just like this that would be great. Lily informs him the second wind artifact is about to finish and he's gassed out, saying that was fast. He tells her to activate the third one, and we see it launching a wind blast into the kill zone. Flashback again, we learn there's only 3 artifacts, but there is a problem here. They can only activate for 5 minutes and they take 15 minutes to recharge. Taku says this is the incomplete part of the plan. The first artifact will block them for 5 minutes, and the recharge time is 15 minutes. So even with the other 2 buying time, they still need 5 minutes for it to recharge, and during this time the gargoyles will swarm in relentlessly. Flashback ends with Lily saying 1 minute until the last artifact stops. Taku watches on, wondering if they'll be able to hold them off for the 5 minutes needed. As the gargoyles begin to fly at the soldiers on the wall, they crash on the cannons. Taku looks around and begins to panic, but tells himself to get his shit together. He says that it's not that they could hold them off, but that he has to make it so they can. He tells everyone to get ready. Lucas says that if they'll just rush to the center, wouldn't it be better to shift the firearms toward the kill zone? Taku says no, since then the sides would open up, making it so they could infiltrate from there. He claps his hands, telling them all to listen up. He says for the next 5 minutes the real battle begins. He says since they've been through trained battles, he believes they can withstand it easily. But there are countless variables, so anything could happen. So before they go into battle, he wants to slap all of their hands. Lucas loses his high quality art and asks what he means. Taku repeats himself, and we all know it's due to Maestro's buff of a random effect. He wondered how he'd get the chance to use it. He tells Lucas to hurry and give him his palms. Lucas asks why, but Taku tells him to stop barking and slaps his hand. We see he's got his MP consumption reduced by half for 3 minutes. Lucas gets a blue aura around him, and starts to pog out of his gourd. Then tells him to hit him more in the future. Evangeline says if something good happens then it's her turn. He quickly slaps her palm. She got her defense boosted by 10%. She also begins to feel the effects, and says next time he should do it somewhere other than her hands, since it affects her combat. He asks her where it should be then, and realizes he's got the put on a list Riz, and quickly apologizes to her. Damien's hands are shaking as it's his turn, and Lucas wonders what's wrong with him. Then he realizes that it might be because Damien has bad memories about punishment. He smacks Damien's hand, and it gives him unlimited stamina. Damien is surprised, saying he thinks he can do anything now. Taku says he better enjoy it while he can, and since he buffed all the defenders it's Lily's turn. He calls out to her, and she looks so excited. Her stopwatch then goes off, and she tells him the artifact is finished. Taku looks at the kill zone to see the gargoyles beginning to fly in. Lily tells him that they are coming. It's the third wave on its way. Since half of them fell from the artifacts, there are only 50 left. It is a 50 versus 5 going on, but in a defense RPG it's nothing. Taku says these 5 minutes will change the world, and he starts to unbandage his hand since it's feeling better, and he stands before the enemies. He tells them all it's time to have some fun, and they have a good old WWE stare down. A group lands right in front of Taku, and he says there's nothing to worry about since everyone was buffed up. He readies his wand, and tells them to come at him. His cool moment is cut short as Lucas starts clapping some gargoyle cheeks. And he realizes that with all of the buffs to the party that he probably won't even have to lift a finger, as Lucas dashes to the other side of the wall. Lucas uses a skill to move, and Taku wonders how he's moving so fast. But remembers that usually his movement skill takes a lot of MP, but with the buff he can spam use it. And then it's just repeated flashes as Lucas taps into the speed force. Taku watches, saying it seems like he's moving exactly as he did in the game. Evangeline starts to taunt the gargoyles, and she gets their aggro. They hammer onto her shield, but she effortlessly knocks their attacks away. With her defense buff, she might be unbeatable right now. While she keeps the aggro of the mobs, Damien just gives them backshots. While the mana gun is strong, shooting it consecutively is hard since it takes a toll on the user, but for the next 3 minutes it's irrelevant as Damien has unlimited stamina. Which turned him into a human weapon. He wonders if he should just get Damien to hard focus on training his stamina. And says Maestro is doing better than he expected. In the game even if you got a good buff it was just for one turn. And he thought it would just be mid, since it was 3 minutes, but in reality that is plenty of time. As long as they defeat this wave the third wave is over. Taku shouts and sends a magic sword out and stabs it into the floor. He tells Lucas to guide the enemies to the sword. He tells Lily it's time to get back to her main job, and she says she was wondering when he'd call her. He's glad she's accepting it, then asks if she wants to get hit once before turning into a flamethrower. She excitedly grabs his hand, then we hear her getting smacked. Lucas quickly brings the enemies over, and Taku tells Lily to attack. She readies herself, then begins to cast a giant fireball. Taku wonders what kind of buff she received, and she starts to use a skill called Fire Cannon, while screaming to die. The gargoyles get directly hit by the attack and melt. Taku sees that she is gassed out, and said he expected this much since she went all out. After that, the other gargoyles began to scatter, but Evangeline grouped them. She's even trash-talking them. Damien tells her to lift her shield. And fires directly at her shield, ricocheting the bullets into the gargoyles. Taku's jaw drops after seeing this. Damien is also proud of what he's done. Evangeline says last one, then stabs it with her lance. Just like that, the third wave was defeated. Evangeline tells Damien that was dope. Taku says everyone did well, and they all are happy to be praised. Lily then yells that the first artifact is done recharging, and it's ready to activate. Taku tells her to get it started, then it begins to fire. Damien then tells Taku that they are running low on bullets. It's time for wave 4, Taku says while they cleared 3 easily it still took a toll. Since both of Damien's rifles are pretty much out of durability, the same with Lucas and Evangeline's weapons too. Lily is perfectly ready to go though. Taku says he has a few more tricks, but the main party has pulled their weight, so it's time to rest. He calls for the shadow unit, then says that it's their turn to block the enemies like the main party did. And if they need it then he'll help. Godan tells him to just focus on resting. Evangeline is excited to see their skills, but Lily watches on with disdain, since she cannot get over her emotions. Damien realizes the atmosphere is a little tense, then asks Taku if it's something he needs to know about. Taku says he just needs to get used to it, since he'll keep using the sub-party, the tension will be unavoidable. One of the gargoyles climb over the wall, roaring at them all. Taku smiles saying it's time for the shadow unit to prove to everyone their worth. Godan puts his hand over one of the dead gargoyles and begins to cast magic, saying it's time to get into formation for large monsters. Taku says that the team composition is extreme, and he'd never have tried this comp in the game. Since it's too heavily favored toward firepower, and without a tank or healer it's dangerous. But these sorcerers are supporters, rather than DPS. Godan creates walls from the gargoyles' corpses, and Taku keeps explaining how their combination has a high chance of working, and due to how it's set up they all receive pretty large bonuses. If they just perform well, then they can wipe the enemies out quickly. God Hand tells Bodybag to restrain the enemies in the middle, and for everyone else to fire. We see them readying their weapons, and even Burnout's big-ass ballista. The gargoyles screech, running straight towards the defensive walls. And arrows begin to rain down onto them. God Hand realizes normal arrows won't cut it, so tells them they can use their skills. And assigns their positions. They reply to the order, and Skull activates his skill, launching an arrow at one of the gargoyles, headshotting it instantly. Taku wonders if that's why his name is Skull. Old girl leaps off the defensive wall, saying it's her turn. One of the gargoyles swing at her, but she slides under it, then creates distance from it while giving it minor backshots. She says they are quite sturdy and she'll run out of arrows, so she has no choice. She tells Burnout to take over for her, and we see her ballista beginning to light up. She tells them all to get down, then unleashes the arrows. The arrows begin to rain down on the gargoyles. And each individual arrow is exploding due to her passive skill. This is why Taku kept an eye out on Burnout. If he builds her right, she'll be perfect for mob hunting. Some of the gargoyles begin to head to their defensive line, but we see one of them being lifted into the air as Bodybag says too bad. Then she launches it away from them. The other gargoyle goes to attack, but God Hand avoids it. Then puts his palm on the gargoyle, causing it to shatter into pieces. Since they are nothing due to his power. The fourth wave was instantly destroyed, and Damien asks if this is how archers are meant to fight. He's amazed, and says if he learned more skills related to shooting he'd be more useful. Taku says that he just needs to do his best. And that he's already irreplaceable, and a massive help. It's not like Damien can learn archery anyway, so it's better for him to think about using his own talents. Taku is pleased with how well the Shadow unit performed. Due to their performance, by the time the third artifact was activated they beat the fifth wave. Taku says things are going smoothly for now, which means something bad is about to happen. He gets an alert that the enemy info has updated, and we see the boss type now. Taku is confused since for it to update, it means the boss is here on the battlefield. But he doesn't see it anywhere, then he spots something soaring in the sky. Taku realizes it's the boss, and tells everyone that he's above them. So to prepare themselves, the boss zones in toward the Shadow unit. Crashing into them, sending some of them flying. Burnout and Skull seem to be injured, and Old Girl stares at the boss, as it begins to emerge from the rubble and roars to alert everyone of its presence. Old Girl begins to panic, then shoots an arrow at it. It just pisses it off, causing the boss to swing his flail, smacking Old Girl straight in the side. We see she is damaged. Lucas says that he'll help them, but Taku yells saying he needs to wait. Since there are two bosses. He sees it falling from above, but he wonders what it is aiming for. Which of course turns out to be the artifacts. Taku yells saying Lily needs to wheel away now. She asks what, but it's too late as the boss lands beside her, launching her into the air. She looks very worried as the boss swings his flail down onto her. We see it shattering her wheelchair. The boss is surprised, even Taku is, as we see her fire skin activated, causing it to pass through her. The boss then begins to put magic into his mace, and he realizes it's dangerous. Taku tells Bodybag to get Lily. She activates her telekinesis, and makes Lily dodge the attack. Taku gets God Hand to catch her, and he leaps forward grabbing her out of the air. After they land, he asks her if she's okay. She awkwardly crawls away from him, saying yes. Taku then tells Bodybag to take care of the other Shadow unit members. And she gets Old Girl and Skull out of the way. Taku says it's time for the main party to get ready. Since boss monsters behave differently than normal monsters, they are smart, and will try to kill the important enemies. Which is why they attack the archers and artifacts first. They'll focus the damage dealers over tankers, and Taku. Since he's the enemy commander. Lucas says the bosses are a problem, but so are the remaining gargoyles too. It's the sixth and final wave of the defense, but with the artifacts broken their victory is getting closer and closer. Taku says he can deal with them, just leave it to him. God Hand tells Taku Lily is safe. Taku says good, then asks Lily if she can activate the backup artifacts. She says yes. We learn that Taku placed them in other areas of the defense just in case. Taku says to quickly activate the magic multiplier artifact, and designate him as the target. She says okay, but asks how she'll get there with her legs. Taku orders God Hand to carry her there. She obviously doesn't want it. So he barks at her saying that this is a war, so act like it. She apologizes, and he tells God Hand to quickly go. Taku tells Evangeline and Lucas to buy time until the artifact activates. They both start to try to one-up each other. But Taku reminds them the boss isn't going to be easy, so don't let their guards down. Then tells them to go. He checks in with Damien, asking how many bullets he has left. He has 18. Taku asks if he thinks they'll work on the boss. Damien activates his cheats and says that the helmet and armor seem like it has high defense. Taku says that's right, the armor he wears is high in magic defense, whereas the gargoyle itself is strong to physical attack. So they have to remove the armor with physical attacks, then hit the body with magic. It'll take a lot of time, and it's not like he'll sit still. And since Cerberus is a handgun trio, it has a shorter distance than the other guns, so he can't get Damien to go in close range. He decides to restore the firepower, then asks Bodybag how the Shadow unit members are. She says they are all injured, and their weapons are damaged too. Taku tells Damien to heal them all, and he looked happy about being able to do that. Taku tells Bodybag while her team is being healed he needs her. Then to add into the stress, it begins to rain on the battlefield. Taku says this is quite cruel, then the bosses begin to run toward them in sync. Every step they take rattles the fort walls. Lucas and Evangeline ready themselves, and Taku says he'll leave it to them. They begin to run back at the bosses, both sides charging forward and the bosses swing their weapons at them. They both block the hit, but it knocks them back a good bit. Lucas says it was heavy, and Evangeline sees her shield is dented. Taku thinks that of course it would be hard since the boss that was meant to be alone ended up being two. But they can surely hold out, as they are both endgame tankers. Lily then tells Taku that the magic multiplier is ready. He tells her to activate it. This will boost his magic effect by 100%. He is amazed by how he's feeling. Then using the eye of the commander, Taku stares at one of the bosses, then orders it to kill the other. But he begins to vomit blood as it drains all of his magic. It begins to stat check him, and Taku explains that since it's weak to magic it should be weak to mind control too. So if he pushes himself with the magic doubler, he can control it too. He's glad it worked, and tells the boss monster to go crazy. And it hits the other boss straight in the face. It's like a kaiju fight. One of their horns breaks off, and Lucas and Evangeline wonder what's going on. We also learn monsters do not forgive betrayal, so he claps back with his own attack. They start just smacking the piss out of each other. One of them throws the other, causing it to land where the sixth wave did. Taku was wondering how to lure them, but guess he doesn't need to worry about it now. Since now they have created an even bigger internal fight. The non-controlled boss tried to stop the minions, but Taku gets Lucas and Evangeline to block him. Now while the other boss is dealing with the wave, they'll just beat up the other one. Lucas and Evangeline both say bet, and they start scrapping immediately. While it's easier since there's only one, they still are having trouble taking the offense. They have to take his armor off, but if they just get counter-attacked it would be bad. He says there has to be a way, and of course on cue the Shadow unit arrives. Taku asks about their injuries. Godhand says thanks to Damien they can join the battle. He asks about their equipment, and we learn they have temporarily fixed them. So they are ready to go. Taku tells them to join the fight, and we see them all using their weapons. Godhand begins to create spears from the gargoyle corpses too. Bodybag also sends out some brain blasts. And they all hit the boss. Its armor begins to chip off slowly. Taku says they need to keep it up until the magic attacks hit the body. But that reality always strays away from the plan. The boss goes to swing and Evangeline says she'll block it. But since she's clumsy she trips, and the attack starts to fly directly towards her face. It hits her, sending her on a trip. Taku calls out to her, but falls to the ground since he's used too much power. Thankfully Evangeline blocked the hit, but she's going to fall off the fort wall. As she starts to fall Lucas quickly grabs onto her cape and he starts to tease her. Taku sighs out of relief, but he has no time for this since the tankers are gone. Their front line is two. Godhand tells the Shadow unit to launch their attacks, but they don't do anything to the boss. Taku says it's like a bulldozer. Godhand says he'll buy time, and the boss swings his mace at him. But Godhand dodges it and touches the boss's foot, melting it into the ground, but it didn't matter as the boss just broke the floor and uses it like a shoe. Godhand tried but the boss did not care. The monster was solely focused on Taku and the DPS. Damien also tried, but was unable to stop it. Taku starts to stress out, saying he needs to think. He wonders what to do to stop it, but then sees a giant fire behind the boss. We see Lily performing the spirit bomb. Rest in peace Akira Toriyama, you were the GOAT. Taku is surprised, as Lily taunts the boss, then she launches her attack creating a sea of flames around the boss. The boss has gotten extra crispy, and they wonder if the boss is alive or not. But then it moves. Taku tells them it's still alive. But the boss turns around and changes his focus to Lily, who attacked him. She starts to cry, saying she knew it. Taku tells her to get out of there. But of course she can't due to her legs. She also has no mana to activate fire skin. So she had no choice but to stare directly at the boss. The boss swings down onto her, and she closes her eyes, accepting that this is her fate. But we see Godhand's luscious hair flowing in the wind, as he stands before her. She sees his back, and wonders why he's doing this. Blood flies from the attack. Godhand has caught the boss's mace, but it's taking its toll onto his body. Godhand uses everything he has to melt the boss's arm, and opening its chest to expose its core. He asks Lily if she can attack it again, and she musters up all of the mana she has left in her hand. Casting a fireball at the core, she pierces the boss, shattering its core, causing it to fall onto the floor. Taku tells Damien to go heal Godhand ASAP. Lily begins to ask Godhand why he saved her, and he tells her it was just the best choice, since only she has the firepower to give the final blow. Her eyes begin to tear up. Lucas and Evangeline quickly apologize to Taku for making a mistake. Lucas asks for his throat to be slit. Taku says that's enough. While they had some losses, they defeated both the bosses. After the other boss fought the wave, there are only 40 left. They just need to finish the wave, but everyone is already extremely gassed out. Damien has no bullets. Lily and the Shadow unit are manaless. So will they even be able to fight the remaining monsters? We hear the front count's men saying to aim and fire as they launch a barrage onto the gargoyles. He says since there's no need to maintain the kill zone, they will help. Then he asks Taku if they did something wrong. Taku is surprised. Then says no, and gives him the thumbs up. And they cheer for him, saying good job. The rain begins to let up, and there are no more gargoyles approaching the fort. Lucas tells him they've won. Taku looks at the cloud, and comments how it only rained while they were fighting. All of the soldiers were looking at him, and he sighs, saying he knows what he has to say. He says as usual, move the wounded to the temple, report the damages and record all the details of the battle. If they messed up today, they should take it with them to the next battle, and learn from it. Taku has already done this. He reviewed everything he did wrong, the dangers he faced, and what he made others face, and how to go about preventing them next time, so he doesn't lose people. He tells them all as much as they are becoming better soldiers, it is becoming a stronger battlefront. And as it gets stronger, he is becoming a better commander. He thanks them all for completing him, and you can tell he genuinely means it. He then says enough with all the yapping, and to prepare meat and drinks as they are on him today. It's not like he's not paid before. We see Godhand being taken out on a stretcher, and Lily, who sat there and watched in silence. Everyone cheered him on, but we know Lily fighting inner demons. With this, stage 4 was clear and Lily is the MVP. Godhand is critically injured. We see him fighting for his life, while he overhears how everything below his elbow is unrecognizable, and that the Saintess cannot heal it. She tells Taku they need to amputate his arm, and Godhand looks like he's about to pass out. The Saintess says he agreed to having it removed. Then it cuts to during the surgery. Outside the temple we see Taku talking to the kids from the Shadow unit, and him informing them of his state. Then they told him something surprising. He already lost both of his hands 2 years ago. After swapping to prosthetics, that's how he got the name Godhand. Bodybag says he'll just replace his arm with metal and fight like before. Taku is surprised, saying that this isn't about functionality, he isn't a machine. Even if you replace the broken part and replace it, it cannot just be brushed off. These injuries will wound Godhand's soul, making him unable to heal. The Shadow unit is all silent. Taku tells them if they are hurt to tell him, and he will treat it. He said that even though ironically he's the one who pushes them into war. He quickly changes the subject, saying it's time for the feast. While Godhand cannot attend, the rest should eat and rest. Bodybag says they are fine, and they'll wait until his surgery is over. He says okay, he'll bring them some food and drinks over. While he can't celebrate with them, they were very important today. They all look proud, and he tells them to take care of Godhand, and they say they will and to send them yummy stuff. Later that night in the plaza, Taku asks how dare they start a party without the Lord raising a toast. They start chanting for him and going crazy. He gets up on stage saying he'll keep it short. He gets them to chant along with his speech, and they all toast to the victory they've earned today. Taku of course still isn't used to the alcohol here, then asks Ader to do a favor. Ader says he'll do whatever he needs, Taku says enough with that and to send drinks and food to the temple. Ader asks what and Taku politely gets him to do as he is told. Then we see Lily roll up, like she has something important to say. If you've watched till the end, comment, Dragon Ball, to let me know. Rest in peace Akira Toriyama. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.